Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another podcast of CNE. I am David Caduto, along with Aaron Lanuza this afternoon.
Hi, guys.
And we are here with an extremely special guest. A few months back, I promised that I would be getting a phenomenal guest, and finally the time has come.
Yes.
And his name is George Pennacchio.
And you are building this up.
And so, little backstory quickly. We were at a red carpet event about 3 months ago for the movie Forsaken with Kiefer Sutherland and his father, Donald. And he was gracious enough to actually agree to the podcast. So today is our special day that we get to do this. If you would like to reach Mr. Pennacchio, you can Facebook him, and he is on Facebook at www.facebook.com/ABC7George. On Twitter, ABC7George, and Instagram, ABC7George. Now that we have that out of the way, Let's begin. So, first of all, thank you very much for doing this.
My pleasure.
This
will be fun.
This will be very fun. So, let's start. Well, why don't you ask the first question, Aaron?
All right. So, George, you carry yourself with a true ideal reporter. You have that finesse that is really something that everyone, I think, thinks is very ideal. When did you decide that you wanted to be a reporter?
Oh, early on. I was in high school, and I was the editor of the high school paper. It was called The Maroon, and I loved being the editor. And I thought initially I would be a columnist. So I would go to college, and I would become a columnist like a guy in Chicago named Mike Royko, who wrote about whatever he wanted to every day. And then I went to college and went to get my internship at, a newspaper in Chicago. I grew up in LA and Chicago.
Yeah, okay.
And I couldn't get an internship. They only took kids from Northwestern. They had like a relationship with them. So I thought, well, I'll just try TV. And then I tried TV, and I loved it from the first day I was there. So from the first moment I worked in television, I knew that would be my future. And then I went back to finish my senior year in college and was still editor of the newspaper, which I still loved. And it's a great way to write a lot and learn about headlines, which are the equivalent of teases in television or radio. So that's where it all began. But I think I was probably 15 or 16 when I knew I wanted to be a reporter.
Wow. Okay, so let's go all the way back to the beginning. So you said you grew up in Chicago?
I was born in Chicago.
Okay.
I lived there until it was time to start kindergarten. And then we moved to the Los Angeles area, and I actually lived in Linwood.
Okay.
When I was a little boy. And then we moved to Norwalk when I was a little bit older. Then we moved back to Chicago.
Wow.
I went to high school in Chicago and college in Michigan.
Right.
So that's a lot of moving around.
Yeah.
A little bit. And then back to Chicago after college to work my first job at the station where I interned, which was WMAQ-TV.
Nice.
To go back to the family, to the area that you grew up in.
Yeah.
So what did your parents end up doing? What were their careers?
My mom really was a homemaker.
Okay.
More than anything else, because she had 5 kids to raise.
Okay, so you have brothers and sisters. You in the middle? Or
I'm
youngest?
number 4 of 5.
Okay, nice.
And then my father was a contractor.
Okay, very nice. So we discussed what made you. We discussed your writing career. So do you liked writing at a very young age?
I think writing is where it all begins if you're going to be a journalist.
Absolutely.
So there are kids now who come into our world as interns who have this weird idea that they can become a host, and that's what they're going to do. Well, they don't have any of the skills, and so they might be a host somewhere online right now, but then they'll be replaced
Like
by
ourselves.
somebody else. No, but you're doing the work.
Right. No.
But you have research. You've got notes in front of you.
Yeah.
Sure,
so
These are kids who want to read somebody else's writing because they might be very handsome or extremely beautiful, and they think that might take them.
And they don't remember that there are other parts to it as well.
Right? And because you're going to get 2 years older, and someone else will come in, and all that.
Yeah.
You need to start with a base, and if you're going to be a journalist, the base is probably going to be writing for you.
Was there anything in particular that you wanted to write when you were younger?
I liked writing articles, so that was fun. I read a lot. I loved reading magazines and everything. So I got an idea of what it would be like to write feature stories or news stories, entertainment stories, because I read a lot of those entertainment magazines. So it's really just about writing. And that goes to when you're writing a paper in high school or college. And some certain things have to be if it's a science, say, paper, it has to be a little bit more literal. But if you're doing anything creative or in an English class, you get to show your creativity, even if it's just a headline, for what you're calling your paper.
So I know you just celebrated your 20th year here at ABC. So where did it all begin with you? I know you've been in the business for about 30 years?
Yeah, I started in Chicago. I interned there, and I was a good intern, I think.
Yeah.
And I worked with some pretty renowned people of the day. And then when I went back to school and graduated, I went back and met with the bosses, and they hired me. So I was initially just answering telephones in the newsroom back when people actually picked up a telephone. And then I would sort the mail, and I'd let people know, like, so-and-so's on the line. And one of the main anchors there, her name is Carol Marine. She did 48 Hours for a while on CBS, and she now works at PBS in Chicago. And she was a tough journalist, reporter, investigator who also anchored the news.
Oh, wow.
And she said to me one day, "You're the best person who's ever answered the phones here." And I took that as such a compliment, having no idea that she went to the boss and said, "You need to hire this kid."
Wow.
So they hired me to do a job that I probably was not qualified for, because to this day I don't know the difference between Northeast, South, and West, but I was directing people on how to get from point A to point B as part of this job, and that led to being a planning editor at the station, where people would call me and I would let all of our producers know what was happening in Chicago the next day. So I put out a list of here's what's going on. And then that led to me finally realizing if I was going to get on TV, it was not going to be in the number 3 market in the country. So I moved to Monterey, where my mom grew up, and I got a job at a station there as the producer of the 5 o'clock news. Then I said to the news director there, "I could do a lot better than this person you're using up from the CBS feed to do entertainment, because that's what I do." And he said, "Well, show me." So I showed him what I could do, and he said, "Okay, you can do it, but no more extra money."
Yeah.
So I somehow fit that into my schedule, and I was producing the news and doing entertainment stories. So that's where I got my on-air start.
And that was in San Diego?
No, that was in Monterey.
Okay, it was in Monterey.
And then from Monterey, I left being on the air and moved to San Diego to continue producing, because that's what I was stronger at. Producing a newscast, deciding basically what you see, how much time it gets, who's reading it, who's writing it, what the graphics might be, how much sports gets and weather and all that. And I produced the 11 o'clock news in San Diego. But 2 years into that run, they started the morning news, which they hadn't had before. And the boss said, "Does anyone have any ideas?" So I got out my technical writing book from college.
Is this the AP book?
It was just, I know the book you're talking about. No, not the AP style book.
Okay.
It was called Technical Writing, and how to put together a proposal. And I wrote a proposal to do entertainment, and the boss said, "Let me see what you can do." So I did an audition, and then he said, "I want to see it again, but do this." And I did a second audition, and then I did a third audition and a fourth audition. And after the fourth audition, he put me on twice a week doing entertainment in the morning and midday. Then they moved me to the 4 o'clock. And then sometimes, because I was producing the 11 o'clock, I just put myself on TV and would walk out of the
That's
studio.
a nice little perk.
Right? I was producing my newscast and then would walk out to the set and do my segment. And
I'll be right back, guys.
Continue producing the news.
That's great.
And then one day I got a call from KBC asking if I would send them a tape. And so I sent them my tape, and I think there were 400 or so people they'd looked at, and they just weren't finding what they wanted.
That's amazing.
And it narrowed down to, I believe the boss told me at the time, 4 women and me. And then it narrowed down to 2 women and me, then 1 woman and me, and then the boss just couldn't decide, because one person, I think, was considered what they expect.
Right.
And then I was a little bit of a question mark wild card. So she took the audition home to her husband and 2 kids and asked them, just out of curiosity, who they liked. And her husband and 2 kids all picked me. So that was.
So you have a lot to thank them for.
I know,
right?
right? But then she still had to make the decision. And
Right.
She just decided. She told me, I'm either making the best decision I've made in a long time, or one of the worst. And it turned out I think in her estimation that it was a good one.
It seemed like everything kind of moves really quickly for you in the story. Were you able to move this quickly, or was everything kind of linear for you? Did it happen so quickly?
Getting the job?
Getting the job everywhere. I mean, it seemed like everything just happened so
I
quick.
think what happens is you can send an audition tape, and this is good advice for your listeners. You can send an audition tape, you can have news directors watch you online, and they get that version of you. I'll call it the 2D version.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you make a commitment, I've told some of my interns who, like, say, lived in Oregon, fly up to Coos Bay or drive up, see if you can get a cheap ticket, look for it, and then let them know you're going to be in their area. And when you go there and they meet you, it's different because your personality comes through more. They'll see if they kind of like you more. And a lot of students that I recommend just go to a town and try to meet with someone end up getting jobs because they've made the personal connection and they've made the commitment to say, I want to work in your town. So sometimes that's really valuable to get into a car. Maybe you're just driving to Yuma, Arizona, or Bakersfield if you can't handle the move. That's another piece of advice I give to all my interns, and I ask them now before they ever get chosen, like, are you willing to go anywhere? And when they say, well, I'll consider Santa Barbara or Bakersfield, they're not going to be for me because it's an unrealistic move. It's just like saying I want to be a host. You're going to end up being in another line of work.
Yeah.
Because the jobs don't exist. And sometimes female students, more than the men, are in a relationship and they're afraid, oh, I can't leave this relationship to move to Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah, to better their career.
To better their careers, and then their relationship ends, and now they're 25, and they're working in something else, and they don't want to get back into it. So you go to school for 4 years, and then you give it up before you ever start. So I think the best thing is just to at least try it. A lot of these students have to go, and they may hate it and realize, I don't want to do this. One woman I worked with was really doing very well. She was a former intern. She got hired in Spokane. From Spokane, she went to Seattle, I think it was. And then she got an offer to be in a top 10 market and quit. Wow. She wanted to know she could do it. And then she realized she didn't want to do it because it was not Monday through Friday. It was not 9 to 5. It was not good for the life she wanted to lead. You know, if you're a main anchor in some city, you're going to report or anchor on the late news.
Yeah.
So your life is not going to be 9 to 5. It'll be 3 to 11:30 or 2 to 10:30, depending on the time zone.
Well, that leads me to another question. We see you work endlessly, or just hours upon hours upon hours, and you're one of the hardest workers I know. What is your average work day?
Generally speaking, I come in here at 1:30, and I work until 11:30. So that's a 10-hour day.
Yeah. 5 days a week?
At least. Okay. Because there are times when I'll go see a movie on Friday night and go do interviews on Saturday or Sunday.
Interesting.
So
have you ever been spotted in a movie theater?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. No, that's interesting because, some people say, I don't like the notoriety. Oh, that's fascinating. So, speaking of your significant other in marriage, your lovely wife, Erin, let's talk about her fashion, because this is why you are known for what you are known as your vest.
Correct. Well, she created the vest.
So
back in San Diego, she decided I need to have a look.
Right. So let's talk about that. Tell everybody how that happened.
I'm working in San Diego, and we would be on the set, and the boss wanted something a little bit more casual, and so she said, "Well, you can't just wear a shirt. A tie just it doesn't look good." She wanted to create something, so one day she just came out with the idea that I would wear a vest, and so she started making me vests. But the vests were a little bit wilder back when I was younger, so they might have sketches of cats on them, or a Christmas time I had the 12 Days of Christmas. I had a Halloween vest. There was a kind of a harvest vest for the Thanksgiving season. I had a 4th of July red, white, and blue one. All that, which was a lot wilder, but got you noticed.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd try to put my jacket on, and the boss would yell from upstairs, "Take that jacket off!" So I would take the jacket off and just be in the vest. Well, when I came here, it was another question mark. Like, I don't know about this vest thing. I said, well, it's the most asked thing I get. So why don't we try it? And if you don't like it, I'll stop. So I put the vest on, but the boss then said, I like it dressed up.
Okay.
So the casual vest went away, to make room for a 3-piece kind of look with a tie and sometimes a pocket square. The pocket squares, a little secret, are usually scraps of fabric from the vest that she's made. Oftentimes,
Nice,
and they're just
nice.
you know they're not necessarily finished. They're just you know
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
and they're pinned in so they don't move, so they don't fall into my suit. So she pins them all in. She makes all the vests. I have hundreds of them now over the course of 20 years doing it here.
Yeah.
And it's become kind of a signature. So it's not so fun in the middle of August when you're live on Hollywood Boulevard at 4 in the afternoon and it's miserably hot and sometimes humid, but you have to have your look.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Well, no, and that leads us to something else I read about you is that the buttons were the absolute one of the most key components. You say, I read where you said you can take a $120 suit that was on sale, and just by changing the buttons, you can turn it into like a $500 suit.
Well, what happens is I walk into rooms and a celebrity will say, "Oh my gosh, that is a beautiful suit," and I'll say, "Thank you." And I paid, honestly, one time I have a suit that I paid $50 for, and we put nice buttons on it. And the buttons sometimes you can get cheap, like downtown LA in the garment district, but they look really nice, and so it makes the suit seem like it's some kind of a designer suit. And in reality, you're just putting nicer buttons on because you can go buy $150 or $200 suit at Macy's or $1,000 suit at Macy's from Hugo Boss, and they all have the same cheap, like 2-cent buttons on them.
Are you just as interested in getting these buttons and doing the style as your wife? You guys do that together?
I often will look for buttons. So, you know, when you travel, we like to travel.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to bring back stuff. You know, it's a hassle, and we used to buy things for people. Now it's like, no, we're going on a vacation. I like to look for buttons and cufflinks. They're small. And we look for greyhounds since we rescue greyhounds. And so we have some greyhound art and that kind of thing. So that's kind of what we search for wherever we go. So we're going to Lithuania in July.
Oh, wow.
We will be looking for greyhounds and buttons and
That's
cufflinks
amazing.
just in a new country that we've never explored before.
How long are you going?
Just a week.
That's fabulous. Speaking of that, do you have any favorite fabrics for the vests that you like? I know that you brought back some before.
Well, wherever we travel, we will also
Okay.
see if we can find a fabric store. We walk in and we'll buy fabric. Sometimes it's the same fabric you can find in downtown Los Angeles for $1 a yard, so we won't buy it for $10 a yard somewhere else, you know. But sometimes you find something a little bit different. We found cool fabrics in Italy that we've brought back that haven't even been used yet. So it's her creativity, and she feels the need to, okay, I'm going to use this now, and that's all.
Fabulous. And I actually want to send out a warm congratulations. I know she just made the top 5 in that show that on it was on Hallmark.
On Hallmark Channel,
Yes.
Home and Family, top
Yes.
25 they did.
Yes.
And so she was one of 5 one week. She's not moving on to the absolute finals, but in doing the show, she discovered she does do-it-yourself stuff.
Right.
She's now got all these followers who are interested in what she does on Instagram and
Twitter.
She's Gown Girl on Instagram. And so now she has a following and she's enjoying it, and she's got a couple of things planned that you should stay tuned for because I believe one of them has the potential to go viral.
Nice. Absolutely.
Are you guys like each other's best fans?
I think so, because I think it's cool what she did. The first time I ever went to her apartment, she was a tailor or a seamstress before she was really just designing full time. And I'd gone over there to have something altered, and so I said, "Oh my gosh, I love your apartment." And she said, "I love that table." And she said, "Don't touch it." And what it was a cardboard box with that she got at the grocery store that was empty, and she put fabric all over it and put something on it, so it looked great, but it would knock over if you tried to sit on it or something. So then that's when I, early on in our relationship, I dug the fact that she could take, something that was meant for the garbage for most people and turn it into a piece of furniture or
cool.
napkin rings.
So how did you guys end up meeting?
Taylor was my
Taylor,
tailor.
wow.
So I needed a tuxedo for the Emmys in San Diego one year, and I had a tuxedo, but it was too small, so she let it out. It was one of my dad's old tuxedos, and that's how we met, and we were friends for a couple of years before we started.
She was a woman's designer.
She only does my stuff. I'm the only guy client of hers, but she used to do wedding gowns, custom wedding gowns. Now she does just custom work for people. She's got a couple of actresses she helps kind of create fun stuff for.
Nice.
So she enjoys it.
Speaking of the Emmys, you have 3 yourself. How, first, do you remember what they were for off the top of your head?
They were all for producing.
Okay.
I don't really enter the Emmys so much here anymore. I don't feel I need to keep winning.
I mean, I was looking at you've got a laundry list of accolades, and it's just like unbelievable. One of only 4 journalists to receive the Critics' Critic Award from the Broadcasters Film Critic Association, and that's America's largest critic group.
That was kind of a cool event because I was having to give a speech in front of Steven Spielberg and Jack Nicholson, and it was like the year that I won, and they broadcast it that year, and they don't broadcast that.
Right.
They haven't even given the award out since I got it, the last one. I think there were total maybe of 6. I was wrong there, and I was the last person to get it. And so I keep calling myself the reigning critics critic because it has been like 10 years since I got it. And it was kind of a nice moment because Meryl Streep was in the audience. I remember looking at her giving my speech. And there were all these great showbiz talents at an award show watching me get an award and having to give a speech in front of them. So it was a just a cool moment in my career.
Well, as a matter of fact, I saw a clip where Meryl Streep and you were on the red carpet. She came over and gave you a kiss, and I thought that was it was on the red carpet a couple years ago.
Yeah,
that was pretty
Oscars,
cool.
yeah.
Yes. Speaking of you, I mean, like I said, laundry list of accolades. You've been doing the Oscars, the Golden Globes. Do you have a favorite award show?
Well, I think if you're going to be first on any red carpet in a very competitive entertainment world, the one place you want to be first is at the Oscars.
Absolutely.
So I'm first at the Oscars, so I would say that is my favorite award show. The Golden Globes are tough because the line is very long and it's the Hollywood foreign press.
Yes.
And so all these reporters that represent different countries who live in LA get spots along the carpet. A lot better spots than the local LA press get.
Right.
And then it's a 2-sided carpet. So on one side there are all these platforms with ET and Access Hollywood and whatever, Inside Edition, and then the rest of us are on the other side. And there are some stars or their publicists who only have them do the side with the platforms, thinking that that's where all the audience is. Oh. But in reality, we do stories that go out to every ABC affiliate in the country. So I don't know that that's always smart on their part, but it's hard. It's a hard fight when you're zigzagging across a crowded carpet. So it's a tough carpet.
Will you often have any trouble with your stand-ups, or are those stand-ups much easier for you nowadays?
I think you just have a limited amount of time. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, we might want you, Aaron, in the background, and so I might say something like, let's see, Two of college's biggest students are here interviewing me. I'm George Pennacchio. We'll get with Aaron and David coming up, so stay with us. And you get one take because you're behind me at that moment. And I'm talking about if it's a big star like Jim Carrey or something.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And we're saying, hey, just about to talk to Jim Carrey. I'm George Pennacchio at the premiere of blank.
Yeah.
What's he going to tell us now? Stay with us. And then
so you have to kind of go with it.
You just go with it. And that's really good advice also for any budding journalist. Mm-hmm. It's hard to memorize every single thing you want to say, and when you're live in the field, there's no teleprompter. You are just working, especially if it's breaking news. You have to write down a couple of notes and go with it, and that makes it much more conversational. And if you know your subject material or you know what you have to hit, it sounds fine.
It sounds like it's more flowy.
Right. And every time I do a stand-up, a tease, say, it's going to probably be a little bit different, and it should be, because that just makes you more comfortable in your own skin of what you're doing.
Gotcha.
When you get locked down to saying these exact words and you mess up one word, there's nowhere to go.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just say in your head, I have to get this idea out, I'll get it out.
Yeah. So do you have any favorite interviews? I mean, you've interviewed, I don't know, countless celebrities, sports figures. Do you have any favorite interviews that just stand out that's just like, I loved this person? Or,
Sure, I do. I always loved the late Robin Williams because his goal was to make you laugh. And so I would leave almost every interview that I did with Robin Williams over the course of many years with a headache or a stomachache or both. Because as soon as you said a word like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm out of time, I'm getting my rap, he would go and start rapping. Or you use a particular word and he'd pick it up and then do an accent. And, so it was just, I cried in his room sometimes. And you're interviewing them for 5 minutes, it's not like it's a long amount of time.
You brought your dog with you at one point.
I brought my dog. Yeah, it was a dog movie. And I brought a dog, and you saw my dog just kind of walk in the background of a star. And one of them had gas in the room. But they're nervous.
I'm sure that was
they're
interesting. No, absolutely.
It was with Elizabeth Perkins, and she was fine with it.
Nice.
But yeah, I rescue greyhounds with my wife and I. We do that.
Yeah.
And so I forget what your question was now.
No, well, interviews.
Oh,
I mean, you were talking about
right.
Robin Williams, who just make you laugh and unbelievable.
From classic Hollywood, I would say the late Maureen O'Hara, who was in the original Parent Trap and did a lot of John Wayne movies. Mm-hmm. And she was one of the rare times that I felt like I was in the presence of a movie star. She walked into the newsroom and people stopped typing. You couldn't hear the keyboards moving because they wanted to see who this woman was, who was at the time 82, 83, 84 years old, and she walked through the newsroom, every inch the movie star. And then we sat down, and she was a great interview, and she'd written her autobiography, and I talked to her for almost a half an hour, which I shouldn't do because that's too long for what you can use.
Right.
But it was one of my favorite interviews of all time because it was just unfiltered, and she'd reached an age in her life where she was going to say and write whatever she wanted to. And she did, and that made it much more potent. And then in today's world, I will say one of my favorites is Nia Vardalos from My Big Fat Greek Wedding in the sequel. Mm-hmm. And the story goes way, 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 way back. I gotten a press release, and it was just, I think, done from a manual typewriter and mimeographed, like with dark purple.
Right.
And handwritten. And it was a press release for a one-woman show that was going to be on Santa Monica Boulevard, I think, like in Hollywood or West Hollywood. And I liked the title of the show, and I said to the producer, this could be fun, let's try it. And she goes, I like it. So I showed up to interview Nia Vardalos for her one-woman show, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, long before the movie, long before anything.
That's amazing.
And she thought I was there because in the bigger theater next door, they were doing a Whose Line Is It Anyway with Drew Carey. And I said, oh no, I'm here to talk to you. What? Because there was no way to reach her.
Right.
We just had to go
right.
to the theater and cross our fingers. And it ended up being the start of a great relationship because I was the first person to interview her. And then when I got that award, Critics' Critic, right. she presented it to me on stage.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And I followed the whole My Big Fat Greek Wedding production into being released and covered the premiere. Nice. I just covered the sequel. She came here to talk about it, and she said, whatever movie I do for the rest of my career, I'll talk to anyone they want and you.
Nice.
Wow.
She always wants to talk to me because before people knew her name, I did.
Nice.
So that's nice. So that just is a kind of a nice kind of friendship.
Yeah.
Really.
You have a good eye for those things then.
I don't know. I don't know. I like to tell stories that not everybody else is telling. It's, movie premieres are one thing, and you get there and there are 50 other people that are going to tell similar stories. Mm-hmm. So you have to be creative. Correct. So you can get questions that maybe the other people aren't asking. Mm-hmm. Or you go to an event where you're the only camera and you're telling people in LA or elsewhere a story that no one else is going to tell. And for me, those are a lot more fun because I feel like I'm imparting information that people might not have a clue about.
Do you feel like this is stuff that comes easy to you? Do you just think this is, I know how other people are thinking, this is not what they're thinking, we should talk about this?
Yes. I think you need to come up with something. Just because as soon as you ask a question when you're 14th in line that they haven't asked,
they've heard it 13 other times.
They perk up
and they go, "Oh wow, yeah,
that's a great question," and then they answer. Or I haven't been asked that before, and sometimes they have to think about it.
They get more lively.
But you got it, Aaron. They get more lively. They suddenly wake up because they get to be on their toes again. Because it gets boring saying the same thing.
Well, no, I can speak from personal experience myself. When we were on the red carpet and Carl Weathers was coming down the line, mm-hmm. and I had actually asked him what his favorite cowboy was, and I had actually stumped him because he never really had heard that, and it was like, wow. And the one thing I think that I've heard is when somebody says, that's a great question, you've done your job.
And they're also thinking, how am I going to answer this when they're saying, that's a great question? And
so, wow, I
their
don't
mind
know.
is spinning.
Yeah, exactly.
In a good way.
Yeah, exactly. So
he enjoyed that question.
Yeah, he did. So we've talked about favorite interviews. Are there some interviews that are just horrible? That just like, Oh my goodness.
Sometimes there are interviews that are not good, and sometimes it's not your fault. You go into an interview, and this happened recently with an actress who I like, and she likes talking to me. But I talked to her for 8 minutes about a movie that she's in, that's in theaters now, that she hadn't seen yet. So she could not respond to the questions because she had no idea what it really looked like and what she really sounded like, and if scenes that she were involved with were cut out or not. So I left that room thinking, oh my gosh, like that was a terrible interview. Yeah. But it wasn't all my fault.
Right.
Because I'm throwing her questions that I think are good, that viewers might like, but if she hasn't been able to see the movie yet, it's not good.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot where stars have not seen the film they're in. I've been on lines where people are telling me they're in the movie and, you know, really excited to see it, and then they're not in it because they've been cut out. And it's like, I'm not going to tell you you were cut out of the movie.
Yeah,
And it's happened to me a couple of times. Like, I know you're barely in this movie, but I really liked what you did.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not in it much? Whoops.
Yeah. Speaking of friendships, so you must develop friendships with these celebrities all over the years. And I know, you know, even this year, unfortunately, all the time, we seem to be losing some of the older ones. Muhammad Ali brings to mind but just out of curiosity, did you have a chance to meet him?
One time, I believe, on a red carpet, and he was with Layla, or it was when he was there when she was on Dancing with the Stars for his daughter, but just briefly.
Speaking of Dancing with the Stars, you are the only professional I know that has gone to every single episode.
Pretty
Over
much.
22 years.
Well, I've covered it for all 22 seasons. I've
300. I have the number here. Let me. I have to. 384 episodes, George.
Well,
That's
I've been
phenomenal.
on vacation for a couple, and they've sent me to other events for a couple, but I have covered more Dancing with the Stars than any other reporter.
I saw a quote and it said, you know, I feel like a piece of furniture. And somebody says, you know, well, what was the piece of furniture? Because that's just phenomenal that the longevity of not only the show, but you're able to be there because you feel like a fixture. And does it feel surreal?
I think it feels good because when you're there and they know you for all these seasons, they know that you're going to come and ask them something
So they just
different.
wave and say hi.
Well, yeah, they kind of, I know them all, which is great. And I know the crew. And if you ever get a chance to go to the show, you would be fascinated how they change the set over the course of a commercial break for the next dance. The setups are just as fun as the show itself.
Really?
But I sit in the press room.
Yeah.
Because it's easier and I get to take my notes and come up with questions that I can ask them. You know, when the show first started, I was the only reporter ever asking the professionals questions.
Yeah.
I was the only reporter to begin with.
Yeah.
And then by season 2, the show had done well, and there were a few more.
Yeah.
And then by season 3, it was crazy. Mm-hmm. But I asked the professional dancers questions, and so they always liked coming to me because in a line where they weren't asked anything, they were just eye candy, the men and the women, and just smiled and looked at their celebrity partners, I would say, well, tell me about this. And then all of a sudden they got to speak. And then I was producing so many stories because I would do a 4 or 5 and 11 o'clock story that I loved showcasing these pros and getting to know them. And so early on, when no one talked to the pros, that solidified my relationships with all of them.
Nice.
Because I knew that they were a big part of Dancing with the Stars.
So you look for those niches. You're looking for those things that no one else is looking for constantly.
And that will make you a better reporter. And it doesn't have to be controversial. Yeah. It can just be interesting. You know, there'll be sometimes a celebrity will be so grateful to talk about a pet project. Mm-hmm. They might make $10 million for doing one movie and scale for something they're working on. Or you know that they went and did something for a friend. Meryl Streep did a TV movie one time because it helped in a disease world where she had a friend whose daughter or son had this illness. And so she went and did a TV movie for her friend, which I think is really fantastic.
Absolutely.
And so when they do something for the love of it and not for the money, they're often more passionate. And sometimes those passion projects are what get them real attention. You know, Sylvester Stallone made all that money for all those Rocky movies and Rambo movies, and then he did a small film called, I think, Copland.
Yes, with Harvey Keitel.
Right. And all of a sudden, he was considered more for his acting than just being a movie star. Mm-hmm. So when he steps out of the box a little bit, and playing recently Rocky Balboa
Yes.
as an older man.
Yes.
And it wasn't all, bound up and
Right.
everything. It became more real. And I think people want to see him succeed in that world. He didn't get the Oscar, but look at the attention that it got him because he went outside the box. And so oftentimes when you don't need the money, you do something that feeds you artistically.
So it looks like you look at the culture and the people very well, and it seems to go back to your roots, where you had anthropology as your.
Oh my
one
gosh, you did your
bachelor.
homework. I have a degree in anthropology and broadcast journalism.
So what? Not to cut you off, Aaron.
Sure.
So what basically? Why anthropology?
Because anthropology is the study of the culture of people, and it basically requires you to be nosy. So it was cultural anthropology that I really focused on. And so it takes you into different worlds. It makes you much less judgmental in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I would venture in with my studies into places in Africa or Portugal where life is so different. And if you're looking at it from this is how you're supposed to live because this is what we do in America, then you start seeing that world in a way that almost feels wrong. But if you realize, you open the scope of what life is like and the history that it goes back to and all of that, then all of a sudden you realize that it's the way they live, and you accept the way a culture lives because it's what they do and what they've done for hundreds of years or thousands of years.
Does that keep you separated from your work and more away from the actual relationships, like the friendships that you make?
Well, I don't have a lot of celebrity friends because sometimes that celebrity friend suddenly gets a divorce and then you're reporting on the divorce or there's
So it's kind of
DUI.
conflict. It's a conflict of interest essentially.
Yeah, sometimes I will say there's a story that doesn't feel like it's one I should be telling because I might feel too close to it, and that's respected. But when, this is Hollywood, and I see stars at the grocery store. My neighbor is on a television show. The guy down the street who now has his parents in the house has been on a show for, I think, 10 or 11 years. There are people who are on classic television shows like Leave It to Beaver that live in my neighborhood, or movies like Dressed to Kill or RoboCop.
Right.
And so in Los Angeles, it's just part of your community. So of course you're friends with the guy who lives across the street from you.
Right.
Of course.
Yeah.
So will that be awkward if something bad ever happens? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or you step back and say, he's my neighbor.
Yeah.
So maybe you can tell the story from that point of view if he wants to talk to you about whatever this thing is, and someone else does the main story, and you say, but we sat down with him and this is what transpired. But you set it up and you're honest and you say he's my neighbor.
Right. Absolutely. You're giving
don't
a
lie.
disclaimer essentially.
Exactly.
Speaking of traveling, back in 2007 you went to South Africa for the Lion King, for the opening of that.
This was an interesting...
Tell us about this, because this was fascinating. I mean, it's a huge hit.
Once upon a time, I was interviewing Oprah, and she mentioned going to South Africa. And I said, are you inviting me? And she said, I am inviting you. So she invited me, but then the station decided it would be better to send somebody else because it was a newsier story, not really showbiz. So I got, I felt I was done wrong by not getting my trip to South Africa. And then a couple years later, our general manager was having a conversation with Bob Iger, who runs the company, Disney, and he said, hey, you going to come to South Africa for The Lion King? And the boss said, well, I think we might. And then they decided they should.
Yeah.
It's finally
So
time.
I got to go because now it was show business. But while we were there, we thought we should do some other stories because
absolutely.
we're going all the way to South Africa, and we were in Johannesburg. So I covered The Lion King, which was interesting. It was a whole different world because on Broadway or in Hollywood, everything is very, very structured. And there were days I know that, like, the second trumpet didn't come because he had a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
There were times where I don't think it was a complete band.
Yeah.
But The Lion King debuted in this gorgeous theater there, and I got to talk to all the people who were involved, and they were really excited because it was a big thing coming to South Africa, being an African story. So I told that story. Oprah brought the girls from her school to opening night, and that was funny because she goes, oh my gosh, you're everywhere I go. So I got a nice interview with Oprah in South Africa, who just couldn't believe I was there. What are you doing here? I'm here for you. And then I did a story on a woman who was Paris Hilton at the time was like the Kardashians.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
And there was a girl in South Africa who was like the Paris Hilton of Johannesburg. And so I got to do a story with her, and she drove up in a Porsche in the Soweto ghetto, but the people loved her. She was very attractive, and she was married to this like older man,
Yeah.
and she was mysterious and everything. She was a trip.
Yeah.
But there was my story on her, and then I did a story on a really great story. Sometimes you think it's the way life happens. I am printing out different emails before my trip, and while I'm printing it out, I get an email, random, about a hair salon in Santa Monica that was selling items made by the women of South Africa. This is the night before I leave. It's like,
Wow.
what?
Yeah,
So-
That's
close
crazy.
call.
And these women who live in South Africa have husbands who often would die of AIDS because the AIDS epidemic is so still strong there, that they had 3 kids to raise and they couldn't leave the house, so they started making crafts. And so with the lids from cans of soda or different things, and so I thought we should do this story. So I found the warehouse in Johannesburg where all this stuff went, and then we talked to the man who ran it all out and sent it all out to places around the country, and then these women would get a portion of all the sales. So they were able to raise their kids in their homes and sell African crafts to the United States or different countries. So I went when I got back from South Africa, we went to the salon in Santa Monica, shot the products they sold, interviewed the owners of the salon and why they do it. And so that was another story. And then we just did a story while we were there because it happened that UCLA was doing a study on AIDS. And so I was out of my comfort zone, normally covering show business, but I was working with a producer who actually, again, how things happen, is our health producer.
Wow.
So she knew people at UCLA who were involved, and so we got there and they were testing people, and what was happening was kids were going to be tested for HIV who were 18, and seniors who were like 50 or like 60, like their grandparents. And the problem was in the middle, people not getting what was going on, but the wise people in the community, you'd say, were understanding it and trying to teach it to the younger generation. So there was still a gap, but I think the tide was starting to turn there. And I thought that was a cool story to tell. And who knew that UCLA was in Johannesburg trying to do important medical work.
Nice.
So I came back with some good stuff.
Fantastic. So let's talk about your acting stints. I know you've done a couple of...
Okay, I'm not a good actor.
No, well, you've done it. You've
But you
done
do
a couple
voiceovers.
movies. Absolutely. You've done
movies.
voiceovers.
Playing
You've
yourself.
done a couple of... So is acting something that... I know you just did the Nurses Ball, last year and this year
I've
for General
done the Nurses
Hospital?
Ball several times now, and it's on General Hospital, and they have this big ball that raises money for a charity, and all the people of Port Charles, the fictional town of General Hospital, show up as if they are the stars of the town, and the local press is there to do the interviews. But I play a reporter named George Pennacchio,
How ironic.
who interviews one of the main players
Right.
of the show on their way into the ball.
Right.
So it's usually just 3 lines. I get so nervous about it every time they ask me. 3 lines playing myself, but you're not an actor, and am I looking in the right place? All that stuff.
Well, that's
And-
ironic because you do such a good job. You do such a phenomenal job on it, and it's just so
Natural.
Exactly, it's
but
natural.
I'm asking questions that I'm not writing, and
I
have
see.
interaction with someone. I don't
Yeah.
interact. Usually, I'm reading to the camera. I'd be
So I wrote everything already. I don't need to
But they're
do
lines,
that
though, so-
exactly.
There are lines,
Yeah.
and so you can change
all
them a little
memorized.
bit. They're okay,
Yeah.
but you get 1 or 2 takes.
Yeah.
They don't want to. They need to keep that ball
Right.
rolling on those shows.
No
So,
pun intended.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought we'd finish up. So I want to thank James Lipton for this little questionnaire. You know what I'm talking about.
I sure do.
Yes. So, what is your favorite word?
My favorite word, I think, joy.
Okay. What is your least favorite word?
Hate, and I use it, and I'm
Yes.
mad when I do.
Okay. It's better than some other words. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Telling a story that has not been told before.
What turns you off?
Big ego.
What is your favorite curse word? Or if you don't want to give the curse word, you can give something to the extent of the curse word.
I think the one I use most would mean excrement.
Okay, fabulous. What sound or noise do you love?
Sound or noise do I love? It's hard to beat the sound of the ocean when you're on vacation right in a hotel room by the beach.
That's the best answer I've ever gotten.
Yeah,
by
sounds like a
far.
vacation, man.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Construction.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Novelist.
What profession would you not like to do?
Digging ditches.
And finally, if heaven existed, what would you like to hear God say when you arrived at the pearly gates?
I've been so looking forward to meeting you.
Fabulous. Okay, so
Those are great responses.
That's it. So I want to thank Mr. George Pennacchio. We've had a fantastic time talking to you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you
And
so much.
so I'm David Caduto,
I'm Aaron Lanuza.
I'm George Pennacchio.
and you've been listening to C&E. Thanks, guys.